The first thing I saw when I walked into my parents' house that Christmas was my suitcase already sitting by the door. Not in the hallway. Not in my old room. Right by the entrance, like I was a guest who wasn't expected to stay long. And that's when I realized something was very, very wrong. Because I hadn't even unpacked yet. And somehow, my family had already decided what I was there for. To carry them. All of them. Before we begin, if you've ever been the one everyone leans on, the one who gives and gives until there's nothing left, you already know how this story feels. My name is Heather Collins, and I share stories about betrayal, justice, and the moments when people finally stop being taken for granted. If you believe in karma and in standing up for yourself, you're going to want to stay with me for this one. Because what happened that Christmas changed everything. And by the end, no one in my family would ever look at me the same way again. I hadn't been home in 3 years. Not since I moved across the country, working 2 jobs, building a life from nothing after college. I barely slept back then. I lived in a tiny apartment that smelled like burnt coffee and laundry detergent. I ate ramen at midnight and learned how to stretch every dollar until it screamed. But I was proud. Because I did it alone. No handouts, no safety net. And maybe that's why I didn't see it coming. The call from my mum had sounded warm, soft, almost fragile. "Heather, honey, it just wouldn't feel like Christmas without you here." Her voice had trembled in that way that triggers something deep inside you, that instinct to protect, to comfort. To come home. I remember sitting on my bed after the call, staring at my phone. My chest felt tight but hopeful. Maybe they missed me. Maybe time had softened things. Maybe, just maybe, this visit would feel like family again. So I bought a plane ticket I couldn't really afford. Packed gifts for everyone. And flew home. The house smelled exactly the same when I walked in. Cinnamon candles, pine cleaner, the faint, stale scent of old carpets. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt like stepping into a memory that no longer belonged to me. Mom hugged me quickly, too quickly. Her arms barely wrapped around me before she pulled away. "Oh good, you're here," she said, already turning toward the kitchen. "We've got a lot to do." Not "I missed you." Not "How was your flight?" Just "work waiting." I laughed awkwardly, thinking she was joking. She was. Within 20 minutes of arriving, I was chopping vegetables while she scrolled on her phone. "So," she said casually, "your sister's been having a hard time." Of course she had. Emily always had a hard time. She had never held a job longer than 6 months, always had some crisis, some emergency, some reason she needed help. "And your dad's hours got cut," Mom added, sighing dramatically. "Money's tight this year." A cold, familiar knot formed in my stomach. I knew that tone. It was the same tone she used when I was younger, when she'd tell me how stressed they were right before asking me to give up something, or fix something, or sacrifice something. But I pushed the feeling down. I wanted this to be different. Then Emily walked in. She didn't hug me. She just looked at me and smiled in that sharp, sideways way she always had. "Well," she said, arms crossed, "looks like our little success story finally came back." The words sounded like praise. But her eyes were full of resentment. And I felt it immediately. The air between us turned heavy. Like I had just walked into a room where everyone already knew something, except me. That night at dinner, I started to understand. It began subtly. Dad asked about my job, but not in a curious way. In a calculating way. "So," he said between bites, "you must be making good money now, huh?" I shrugged. "I do okay." Emily laughed. "Okay means she's rich compared to us." Mom chimed in softly, "We're proud of you, honey. You've always been the strong one." Strong one. That phrase landed like a weight on my chest. Because in my family, being the strong one never meant being appreciated. It meant being used. And then Dad said it. The sentence that changed everything. Well, he sighed, pushing his plate away, maybe it's a good thing you're here. We could really use some help. I froze. My fork hovered midair. What kind of help? I asked carefully. They exchanged looks. A silent, practiced communication. Then Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Just until we get back on our feet, she said gently. And in that moment, I knew. I wasn't invited home for Christmas. I was summoned. Because I had become something to them. Not a daughter. Not a sister. A solution. Over the next few days, it became painfully clear. I was expected to cook, clean, run errands, pay for groceries, cover bills temporarily, even drive Emily to job interviews she never intended to attend. Every request came wrapped in guilt. You're the only one who can help. You know we'd do the same for you. Family takes care of each other. But the truth sat heavy in my chest every night as I lay awake in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. They never had done the same for me. Not once. Not when I worked 2 jobs to pay for college. Not when I slept on a friend's couch after graduation. Not when I cried alone in a city where no one knew my name. I had built my life without them. And now they wanted to live off it. The breaking point came 1 week after I arrived. I had just come home from grocery shopping, paid for entirely with my own card, when I overheard something from the living room. Emily's voice. Low, laughing. She's not going anywhere, she said. Mom replied quietly, you don't know that. Oh please, Emily scoffed. Heather lives for being needed, just keep reminding her she's the strong one. She'll stay as long as we want. My breath stopped. I stood frozen in the hallway, grocery bags cutting into my fingers. The plastic handles dug into my skin, but I didn't feel the pain. Because something inside me had just snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet final break. In that moment, I realized something that kept me awake all night. They didn't love me. They depended on me. And dependency isn't the same thing as love. It's ownership. I lay in bed that night, staring into the darkness, my chest tight and burning. My mind replayed Emily's words over and over. She'll stay as long as we want. I felt anger, but beneath it was something deeper. Something colder. Clarity. Because for the first time in my life, I stopped asking how to help them. And started asking a different question. How do I make them stop? That question would change everything. Because what I decided next would turn their entire world upside down. And by the time I was done, they would never, ever call me the strong one again. They would call me something else entirely. But that part came later. First came the struggle. And it was worse than anything I expected. The next morning, I woke up with that same tight feeling pressing on my chest. You know the one. The kind that makes it hard to take a full breath. Like your body already knows you're walking into another day of being drained. For a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, I almost convinced myself I had imagined everything. Emily's voice. Her laughter. That sentence. She'll stay as long as we want. But then I heard the sound of her knocking on my door. Not gently. 3 sharp taps. Heather, she called, already annoyed. Are you up? I need a ride in 30 minutes. No good mornings. No please. Just expectation. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. That was the moment I realized something uncomfortable. I had trained them to treat me this way. For years I had been the fixer, the reliable one, the one who never said no. And people don't question what benefits them. They just keep taking. I got out of bed anyway. Because at that point I still wasn't ready to fight back. Not yet. The kitchen felt cold when I walked in. The winter light through the window made everything look grey and washed out. Mom sat at the table with a stack of unopened bills, tapping a pen against her lips dramatically. "Oh good, you're up," she said without looking at me. "Can you make breakfast? Your dad left early." Of course he did. Avoidance was his specialty. I moved around the kitchen silently, cracking eggs into a bowl. The shells felt brittle in my fingers, and I noticed how tense my hands were. Emily walked in 10 minutes later, scrolling her phone. She didn't even glance at the food. "You're taking me to that interview today," she said, not asked, said. I kept my voice neutral. "What interview?" She rolled her eyes. "At that marketing firm, the one I told you about." I knew that place. She had applied there 3 times before. Every time she either skipped the interview or showed up late or quit within weeks. It wasn't a real attempt. It was a performance. A way to show she was trying. So she could justify needing help. "Emily," I said quietly, "are you actually planning to take this seriously?" Her eyes snapped up. "What's that supposed to mean?" The tension in the room thickened instantly. Mom shifted in her chair, already bracing for conflict. I felt my pulse in my throat. "It means," I said carefully, "I want to help you, but I don't want to keep doing this if nothing changes." The words weren't harsh, but they landed like a slap. Emily's face hardened. "Oh my God," she laughed bitterly. "Here we go, Miss Perfect is going to lecture me now." "I'm not lecturing you," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'm just saying." "You think you're better than us," she cut in sharply. There it was. The real issue. Not money. Not jobs. Resentment. "You left," she continued, voice rising. "You ran away, built your little life, and now you come back acting like we're some charity case." My chest tightened. "That's not what I'm doing." "Isn't it?" she snapped. "Because it feels like you're enjoying this, playing savior." That word hit harder than I expected. Savior. Because part of me had feared that was true. Not that I enjoyed it, but that I had built my identity around being needed. And now they were weaponizing that. Mom finally spoke, voice trembling just enough to sound wounded. "Girls, please, we're family, we shouldn't fight like this." But she didn't say Emily was wrong. She never did. The ride to the interview was silent. The kind of silence that feels loud, heavy, suffocating. Emily stared out the window, jaw tight. I gripped the steering wheel harder than necessary. I could feel something shifting inside me. Not anger exactly. More like exhaustion turning into something colder. Awareness. Because for the first time, I noticed something clearly. Every time I tried to set a boundary, they punished me emotionally. With guilt. With accusations. With silent treatment. And I had always backed down. Always. That day at the grocery store, I realized how deep it went. I was loading items onto the belt when my card got declined. For a second, I thought it was a mistake. I tried again. Declined. A cold wave washed over me. I checked my banking app. My stomach dropped. Nearly half my savings were gone. Withdrawn. In multiple transactions. Over the past week. I felt like the floor had tilted under my feet. There was only one explanation. Someone had accessed my account. And there was only one place I had used that debit card recently. Home. My hands started shaking as I walked back to the car. I couldn't even feel the winter air on my face. Just numbness. And a slow, rising dread. When I got back to the house, my heart was pounding so hard it hurt. Mom was in the kitchen. Emily was on the couch. Watching TV. Laughing. Like everything was normal. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just held up my phone. "My savings are missing," I said quietly. "Do either of you know why?" The room went still. Mom's face paled. Emily's eyes flickered, just for a second. That was all the confirmation I needed. What are you talking about? Emily said quickly, too quickly. I stepped closer. Multiple withdrawals, thousands of dollars. Mom looked at Emily. Emily looked at Mom. And then Mom said something that changed how I saw her forever. Well, she said softly, we thought you wouldn't mind. The words hit like ice water. I couldn't breathe for a second. You what? Her eyes filled with tears instantly. We were desperate, Heather. Your father's medical bills, the mortgage. You took my money without asking, I whispered. Emily crossed her arms defensively. It's not like you need it, she snapped. You're doing fine. That sentence, that one sentence. Something inside me went completely still. Not shattered. Not explosive. Still, like a door quietly closing forever. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifyingly clear. They didn't see it as stealing. They saw it as their right. I walked to my room without another word. Closed the door. Sat on the edge of the bed. And for the first time in years, I cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just silent tears sliding down my face. Because the truth had finally settled in. They would never stop taking. Not until I stopped giving. And that night, staring into the darkness, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg for respect. No, I was going to do something they would never expect. I was going to let them keep taking. For a little while longer. Because sometimes the most devastating revenge is letting people dig their own hole. And I was about to hand them the shovel. I didn't sleep at all that night. Not even for a minute. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the house silent except for the occasional creak of old wood settling in the cold. Every sound felt sharper than usual. The ticking of the hallway clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs, even my own breathing sounded too loud. Because inside my chest, something had shifted permanently. The hurt was still there. The betrayal too. But they had hardened into something much colder. Clarity. For years I had believed that if I just loved harder, gave more, sacrificed more, they would eventually see me. Appreciate me. Value me. But lying there in that dark room, I finally understood something painful and freeing at the same time. They didn't take because they were desperate. They took because I let them. And that realization changed how I felt about everything. I wasn't powerless. I never had been. I had just been willing. That was the night I stopped being willing. And the plan began to form. Not all at once. Slowly. Piece by piece. Because real revenge, the kind that leaves a lasting mark, isn't loud or impulsive. It's patient. Precise. And I had something they didn't. Time. The next morning I acted like nothing had happened. I made breakfast. I smiled politely. I asked Emily how the interview went. She shrugged, already scrolling on her phone. They'll call me. We both knew they wouldn't. Mom watched me carefully, like she expected an explosion. An accusation. A confrontation. But I gave her none of that. I was calm. Quiet. Even helpful. And that made them relax. Because people who take advantage of you don't fear anger as much as they fear silence. Silence means something is changing. And they had no idea just how much. Over the next 2 weeks I played my role perfectly. I paid for groceries. Covered utility bills. Drove Emily everywhere. Even lent Dad money for unexpected expenses. And every time they took from me, I watched them closely. Not with bitterness, with attention. I started noticing patterns. habits, weaknesses, like how Emily kept talking about wanting to start an online business, but never actually researching anything. How Mom constantly worried about appearances, about what neighbors thought. How Dad avoided conflict at all costs. Each detail became a piece of a puzzle, and slowly an opportunity began to emerge. Because one evening during dinner, Emily mentioned something that made my heart skip. "I've been thinking," she said casually, pushing food around her plate, "I should invest in something, build passive income." Mom looked impressed immediately. "That's smart, honey." I kept my voice neutral. "What kind of investment?" Emily shrugged. "I don't know, something safe, something that grows fast." There it was. Greed. Not survival. Not necessity. Greed. And suddenly, my plan became crystal clear. I leaned forward slightly. "Well," I said thoughtfully, "there actually is something." 3 pairs of eyes snapped toward me instantly. Interest. Curiosity. Hope. Hooked. "It's not public yet," I continued calmly. "A startup I've been working with, they're opening a private investment round soon." Emily's eyes lit up. "How much does it grow?" I paused, letting the silence build. "Triple returns in about 6 months," I said quietly. Mom gasped softly. Dad looked stunned. And Emily looked hungry. That moment told me everything. Not a single one of them asked if it was risky. Not one asked how it worked. They only cared about what they could gain. That night in my room, I sat at my laptop and began setting everything up. Not illegally. Not unethically. Just strategically. Because here's the truth about revenge. You don't need to destroy someone. You just need to hold up a mirror and let them destroy themselves. Over the next week, I introduced the opportunity, slowly. I showed them professional-looking documents, charts, growth projections, testimonials from other investors, all real formats, all legally structured. But one detail remained unspoken. It wasn't a guaranteed success. It was a high-risk venture, one that clearly stated in fine print that losses were possible. I never hid that, but I never emphasized it either, because I knew they wouldn't read carefully. And they didn't. Not even a little. Emily was the first to jump. "I want in," she said immediately. "How much?" I asked. "All my savings." Mom followed. Then Dad. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. Emily leaned back on the couch, smirking slightly. "You should invest too," she said. I smiled calmly. "Oh, I already did," I replied. That was true. Just not in the same way. Months passed. And during that time, I slowly withdrew from their daily support. Less grocery runs. Less extra cash. More distance. They barely noticed at first. Because they were distracted. Obsessed with checking the investment dashboard I had set up. Watching projected numbers. Imagining future wealth. Dreaming. 6 months later, the announcement came. The startup failed. Funding collapsed. The investment dissolved. Everything they put in was gone. Completely. The night they found out, the house felt like a storm had exploded inside it. Emily screamed first. Mom cried loudly. Dad just sat there, staring blankly at the table. And then all 3 of them looked at me. Not with anger. With shock. Because I wasn't panicking. I wasn't upset. I was calm. Emily's voice shook. "How could you let us do this?" I met her eyes steadily. "I didn't let you," I said quietly. "I warned you to read everything." "You said it was safe," she cried. "No," I replied. I said it had potential, you chose not to understand the risk. Silence fell. Heavy, painful, truthful. Then I said the words I had carried inside me for years. You took my money without asking, I continued calmly. You assumed it was yours because I had more than you. You never considered how it felt to lose it. Mom covered her mouth. Emily's face went pale. So now, I said softly, you understand. No shouting. No cruelty. Just reality. And in that moment, something shifted between us forever. Because for the first time in their lives, they felt what I had felt. Powerless. Vulnerable. Used. I stood up, picked up my coat and walked toward the door. Where are you going? Mom whispered. I paused. Turned back. And for the first time in years, my voice carried no guilt. I'm going home, I said. Because I'm done carrying this family. And as I walked out into the cold night air, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Light. Free. Untouchable. But what happened after I left? The fallout. The way the truth spread through our entire community. That was the part no one saw coming. And it changed their lives permanently. The night air hit my face like ice when I stepped outside. It should have felt cold. But instead it felt clean. Like I had just walked out of a room that had been suffocating me for years. I stood there for a moment on the porch, my breath coming out in slow white clouds, my heart pounding in a strange mix of relief and disbelief. Because I had actually done it. I had finally walked away. No guilt dragging behind me. No urge to turn back and fix things. Just silence. And for the first time in my life, that silence felt peaceful. I drove to a nearby motel that night, my hands steady on the steering wheel. The road was dark, streetlights passing in slow golden flashes across the windshield. Each mile felt like another invisible thread, snapping between me and the life I had just left behind. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not yet. Because what had happened inside that house wasn't just a private family crisis. It was about to become very public. And that part I hadn't even needed to plan. It happened naturally. Because people like my family don't know how to fail quietly. They explode. They blame. They talk. Within a week, the entire extended family knew about the investment disaster. But they didn't hear the real story. Not at first. They heard Emily's version, which painted me as a villain. According to her, I had tricked them, manipulated them, ruined them financially. And at first it worked. I started getting messages. Cold ones. Confused ones. Accusing ones. How could you do this to your parents? They trusted you. Family doesn't betray family. Each text strung, but not in the way it once would have. Because now I wasn't reacting emotionally. I was observing. Waiting. Because truth has a strange way of surfacing when people try too hard to hide it. And my family made one huge mistake. They tried to sue me. It was Emily's idea, of course. She believed she could pressure me into paying them back. Because in her mind, that's what I had always done. Folded. Given in. Rescued them. But this time was different. This time I was ready. The day I got the legal notice, I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I simply opened a folder on my laptop. A folder I had spent months building. Because from the moment I overheard them admitting they took my savings, I had started documenting everything. Bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals. Text messages where they casually discussed using my money. Screenshots of Emily bragging to a friend about finally getting what Heather owes us. Signed investment documents clearly stating risk acknowledgement. Every piece of proof neatly organized. Not out of spite. Out of protection. Because when you stop being naive, you start preparing. The court hearing lasted less than an hour. Less than an hour to dismantle their entire story. I still remember the moment Emily's lawyer went silent mid-argument, flipping through the documents with growing disbelief. The judge's expression shifted from neutral to stern. And then came the question that sealed everything. Did you or did you not withdraw funds from your daughter's account without permission? The courtroom fell completely silent. Emily looked at Mom. Mom looked at Dad. Dad stared at the floor. And that silence was louder than any confession. The case collapsed instantly. Not only did they lose, the judge ruled that they had, in fact, committed financial misconduct against me. They weren't criminally charged, but the public record remained permanent. And that's when the real fallout began. Because small communities talk. Neighbors talked. Relatives talked. Friends talked. The narrative flipped almost overnight. Suddenly, I wasn't the villain. I was the daughter who had been exploited for years. The sister who had been drained dry. The one who finally stood up for herself. And my family. They couldn't hide from that truth. I heard later that Emily stopped going out much. The same friends who once envied her now avoided her. Because no one trusts someone who betrays their own family for money. Mom became quieter. Withdrawn. The dramatic guilt tactics she once used no longer worked on anyone. And Dad aged the most. Because deep down, he had always known what they were doing was wrong. He had just been too weak to stop it. Months passed. Then one day I got a letter. Not a text. Not a call. A handwritten letter. From Mom. Her handwriting was shakier than I remembered. It said only a few things. We didn't realize how much we were hurting you. We thought needing you meant loving you. We understand now that we were wrong. At the bottom was one sentence that made my throat tighten unexpectedly. You deserve to be a daughter, not a provider. I sat with that letter for a long time. Hours. Because revenge can bring justice. But it doesn't erase grief. And there was grief. For the family I never really had. For the years I spent trying to earn love that should have been given freely. But something inside me felt calm. Complete. Because I no longer needed their validation. I no longer needed their approval. I no longer needed to carry them. And that was the true victory. Not their loss. My freedom. Today, years later, my life looks very different. I have boundaries. Real ones. And I protect them fiercely. I still speak to my parents occasionally. But from a distance. Emily and I rarely talk. Not out of hatred. Just clarity. Because some relationships don't end with explosions. They end with quiet understanding. And that's okay. Because here's the truth I learned the hardest way. Being the strong one doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for others. It means knowing when to put the weight down. And walking away. So if you're listening to this right now, and you feel like you're carrying everyone around you, remember this. Love doesn't demand your exhaustion. Family doesn't mean ownership. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't hurting the people who used you. It's simply refusing to carry them anymore. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt taken for granted, make sure to like and subscribe. I'm Heather Collins, and here we share the stories that remind you of one thing. You don't owe anyone your peace. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is finally let go.